Joining us in our Johannesburg studio today is South Africa's Deputy Minister of Communication, Ms. Pinky Kekana. In 2014, she was elected to be a member of the National Assembly. As a Member of Parliament, Ms. Kekana has served on several committees, including the Standing Committee on Finance, National Assembly committees, and ad hoc committees on the filing of vacancies in the Commission for Gender Equality. In 2015, she was elected in the African National Congress Women's League National Executive Committee and is the Secretary General of the Pan-African Women's Organization. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Malka, and thank you to the listeners.
We're really happy that you can be with us to hear about the insights both into your life, in terms of your portfolio, and looking at what the future holds.
Thank you so much.
So to begin with, you've served South Africa for several years and you've got a focus on the communications domain. We know that ITC is a significant portfolio in today's digital age. Can you share with us, firstly, a few of the landmarks in your career and some of the milestones that you want to achieve?
Look, like you correctly said, I served South Africa in many different ways. At some point I was a mayor in the district of Waterberg, and at some point I was the MEC for economic development as well as the MEC for transport. And currently, as you correctly said, I'm the Deputy Minister of Communications. And this portfolio is one of the first portfolios that I've ever been exposed to. It's one of the critical portfolios because in everything and anything you do, communications is key. But it also says there's quite a number of things that we also need to look at, and not to keep our communities and constituencies in the dark. One, to inform them on every little thing that government intends doing in bringing service delivery and all other things, but also to share with communities developmental issues that play themselves out in the ICT space. And like you're saying, we are now in the fourth industrial revolution. There are quite a number of things that we now have to look at. And one of the things that the President at all times emphasizes that as we go into this fourth industrial revolution, everybody must be kept abreast. Don't leave others behind. And instances of this nature, our women have to also be prioritized. And I think this is one domain that if we really can focus on women, we will be able to deal with some of these things. And I'll tell you why. We're living in the technological space, in the Internet of Things and all other things. Many women are now trying to do businesses. Many women are heading families. And many women are doing all these things that we also have to support them around as the ministry. And just to also make sure that they too move with time. How do we make sure that in their businesses they expand? And how do we make sure that in nurturing and bringing up their children, they are also able to keep up with the gadgets that they buy to their kids and make sure that kids are also protected along those lines. So those are some of the things I am going to focus on in making sure that we contribute as the department in making women to be part of this fourth industrial revolution, whether they have gone to school or not gone to school. Digital literacy is going to be one of the things that we focus on, and it's going to be an area of focus.
And I would also argue that in the digital literacy, it's not just about learning how to use my gadgets and apply things, but I also think it requires a different way of thinking. And I think that for a lot of period, we have been used to this analog thinking of we'll take things one step at a time. I go from A through to B, and we've got this long line.
Yes.
And there's a wonderful quote by Ray Kurzweil where he says that we have been trained to think in a linear fashion, but the truth about information technology is that it's exponential. So if I take 30 steps in a straight line, I'll get 30 meters. But if I take 30 steps exponentially, I'll get to 1 billion.
Exactly.
So we've got to change the way that we think, and think more along the lines of a network society, of that things don't go in a straight line, that we can move from the left to the right, up, down, in the middle, and think dynamically.
Exactly. I think you're very right. You know, yesterday I met a few young women, 3 of them wanting to play in the media space. And one of the realities that they spoke to was that, look, we cannot be thinking of radio or TV the way we're thinking about it now. Everything is going digital. People are able to access media information on their gadgets and so on. So we have to think exponentially, like you're saying, because digital migration is a buzzword today. But they are also saying, look, in this space, there's also a challenge that if government is slow on assisting us to do some of the things, we get flooded by other players in the same field.
And it's a global field. It's not limited to our geography.
Exactly. And you know, they were talking about Netflix, they were talking about all other players in the media space, and they're saying, if we don't keep up and deal with some of these things and be decisive on some of these things, and unfortunately, some of the players and the way content is now moving globally, you can't even regulate it. How do you deal with it as FPB, from Film and Publications Board? How do you deal with it that as this content is flooding South Africa, we are also making sure that you are able to classify it and make sure that the right content goes to the right consumer and so on, and protect little ones. So, and they were also saying, look, even what we want to do, we also want to access the global world and do the same thing. But we need exposure and government to now start to look into funding some of these things, because they were saying, you go to DTI, there is no funding for some of the things we now want to do, digital and all those things. You go to other financial services, they are also not yet there to look at how do we play in this space. And this is a discourse, Deputy Minister, we want you to engage, one, with the Minister of DTI and also other entities in government to say, how do we then come together and deal with these things, so that you don't only have MDDA being the only entity that can just release those stipends for all of us to play.
MDDA, if you can just tell us
Media Diversity Agency, our Media Development Diversity Agency. It's an agency of the Department of Communications that assists community radio stations, community TV, and community print media with starter packs, your setup in studios and machines and all other things for you to be able to play in that space. So they give you startup capital for you to set up all those things. So they were saying it's overstretched now, and the notion of one community radio station, one municipality, it's not gonna work, because everybody consumes content now on the phone.
Yes.
So people are playing or doing are becoming smart even in doing online media development or online radios and all those things. So we have to
and
now
it's worked
move
both
it.
ways, because you've got the consumer who is consuming and taking that demand,
Exactly.
using these methods and different approaches.
Sure.
But at the same time, these young ladies have looked and presented the opportunity of going, you know what, we can be global players too, but we now need to look at how we can make that feasible. So I know that they only imposed this upon you a couple of days ago, but tentatively, what's your thinking of how we can take advantage?
Look, there's an ICT policy that is under review now, which I think almost all the role players, Department of Telecoms and Postal Services, ourselves, ICASA, and all other entities that are responsible for ICT, we have made inputs. And it is at a level where the Minister now of Communications has to go and present it to Cabinet. So it is about looking at how we also adapt as South Africa to what is happening around ICT in globally. So it's one of those things that we'll also look at. So these are enablers, the legal framework enablers that will assist government to now put systems in place for all players to start to benefit out of some of these things. So yeah.